Okay, working on the LS into a Cadillac project. Here's the engine. It's pretty well dressed and ready to go. We've got the adapter mounts and mount brackets installed, and we're getting ready to do a trial fit. We just want to see where the mounts line up and whether we're in good shape. So we'll be hoisting it here in a minute.
I'm going to stop here a minute and talk about mounting an LS engine into an older chassis. The mounting system on an LS is totally different because it has 4 bolts on the side of the block instead of the 3 the old small block Chevy had. So we got some of these ICT billet adapter plates that bolt to the block on the side of the block on the LS with 4 bolts, and then the additional holes let you space a traditional small block Chevy mounting bracket to it and adjust them fore and aft. So here's a bracket that we're going to use, and it's lined up with one of the sets of holes. It's a UMI 958 that's supposed to be for an 86 Monte Carlo, but also in my looking around would be the same as a B car in the 80s. And since we're working with a Cadillac chassis, it's a D car. It's very similar to a B chassis. So anyway, these are the brackets. They're solid steel. They're not quite like the factory mounts, but I can't find the factory mounts. We don't have those, so we went to an aftermarket source. And with the 3 holes, they bolt up to the adapter plates just like the original small block Chevy mounts would do. And then you get to the frame mounts, which are the clamshells, so-called, that have the rubber element in it. That will bolt into the frame. And then the mount attaches to the bracket attaches to the mount with the through bolt. Just a couple of views of these with them sitting on the counter where you can get a better look at things. So here is what the original factory mount, stamped steel mount looked like. And you can kind of see that the lower edges on both sides of where the mounting hole is are used to rest on the steel bars in the clamshell piece. And here's a picture of my engine out of my Camaro upside down. And you can see how that bracket bolted into the engine block in the old school design.
The old Oldsmobile Cadillac mounts are removed and the new mounts are just set in place. The bolts are loose, but what we want to do is set the engine in place and see whether or not the spacings are correct, whether the bolts will go in, or whether we have to enlarge or move holes to get everything to line up. So this is just a trial process, and we'll get it on the engine hoist and bring it over here and see how it goes. Alright, we have the engine sitting in the bay on the hoist just for trial fit, and it's not going perfectly. So what we want to look at is we have the Chevy clamshell mounts sitting on the frame. The bolts are just in the holes. The adapter plates and the brackets on the engine, and the engine brackets are off. They're supposed to fit a Monte Carlo for 350 from the 80s, right?
Mid-80s.
Mid-80s. Which I think is actually also the same bracket that would be used in a B car. It's a pretty common bracket. But anyway, when you get in here and you look at it straight, first of all, we're stopping here on the edge of the mount. Ultimately, this bracket ought to go in and rest here, and the bolt hole should line up. So one would be we may need to grind some off the edge of the brackets so that they get past here, because you want them to be able to drop straight down in. And we kind of have the same thing on the opposite side. It's not letting the engine go all the way down. Now we'll probably try to fiddle with that here for test purposes, but in any case, it seems as if maybe the adapter plates are pushing the bracket out a little wider than stock, because the holes are not looks like we're a little bit wide. And so we'll need to see whether we either elongate these holes and move them up, or weld them up and re-drill them and move them up, or adjust the bracket where it attaches to the frame. Not sure yet, but we're going to keep going at it here and see what we can learn. Alright, well, we went ahead and lifted the engine and pulled these clamshells off the frame and mounted them to the bracket, put the through bolts through on both sides, and then set the whole assembly back down on the frame to see if we could get the bolt holes to line up on the clamshell to the frame. And it was a little snug, but we got all 6 bolts to go into their original bolt holes where the Oldsmobile engine had been sitting with its mounts. And at this point the brackets are sitting on the mount where they ought to be, so the steel bracket's sitting here. The only thing we think we maybe need to do is modify the edge of the bracket so that it will lift off past this tab when we take out the through bolts, so we can mount the mount. I mean, that's how the factory mounts ought to go, is you should be able to pull these bolts out, lift the engine up vertically, and clear this piece of the clamshell, piece of the rubber mount. But that's pretty cool. So right now we've just got the brackets installed, the mounts installed, nothing, we've not modified the frame. Everything's lining up pretty good. The oil pan protrudes below the cross member a little bit, but it looks like it's not below the suspension. So that's looking pretty good. And we don't know that we have the engine angle perfectly correct, but we were trying to get the angle of the mounts right, so it shouldn't be off by a long ways. I'd say it's probably a little bit low in the back. Just checking to see what the clearance would be holding the headers in place, and yeah, that's looking good. Clearance to the steering all the way around. That looks nice. And we know the engine isn't an exact final location because but the angle's close. We've tried to set the engine on the mounts roughly the way it ought to be. So very nice. And let's get another look at the mounts here while we're at it. So there's the bracket going over the top, going over the clamshell, using the original factory holes from the Oldsmobile engine. So all we have to do is figure out how to modify the engine the black bracket just a little, so that it will drop through the bars on the mount. Looks pretty darn good.
Mm-hmm.
How's the clearance to that heater box?
It's got 2 inches up to here,
Okay, well that should be good.
and 1 inch to the frame.
I mean, you might have to watch the heater box. I mean, you could always put a heat shield in there. So we're going to mark these brackets, mark the brackets, to put a little bit of clearance on the outer edge where it goes up against this part of the mount. Going to do that on both sides. Took a little bit, made a mark down there on the corner of the oil pan. There's a boss down there that's a little close to the frame that we can get a little extra clearance under. We don't need that one for this application, so it's probably okay, but yeah, 1/4 inch, the mounts are going to give, and we're going to start bumping that into the frame. Right now, checking the back of the block, the dimension to the cross member for the transmission mount, just to see how far back we are. And then I'm going to pull these bolts when we're done with that and see how much load's on them and make sure that things are sitting right, and then we'll lift the engine back out for now. And boy, excellent trial fit. And I figured we were going to be drilling a bunch of holes and grinding stuff out, and so it's all looking pretty nice. Alright, so today We're going to do another test fit. We've made some modification to the mounts. We've added in the transmission. We're going to roll it, slide it in so that we can verify where the crossmember mount needs to be here in the back. You can see it underneath, and the new mount, we're going to need to extend that crossmember mount to the front of the car. We think 2 or 3 inches, but once we get the mounts, engine set on the mounts, we're going to take a dimension so we know how to modify that crossmember. Keep pressure on it to the driver's side.
Yep.
I'll try to steer. There we go.
That might be,
It's getting pretty close, isn't it?
yeah, so we can start going down.
Okay. Alright.
Yep, that sounds like we're on the top of the trans tunnel.
Yep, so I think now we want to go down a little bit.
That's about it.
Okay. I think we need to get back until we get over clear the clamshell frame mounts, right?
Yeah, we probably have 3 inches. Yeah, we're almost to the point we can start going down.
Down onto the mounts. Okay.
I think we can go down
Down a little bit.
a little bit. It'll probably give us the room in the transmission tunnel to go back just a
Alright.
bit.
I think you're sitting on the mount on this side.
Ah, yes.
There we go. Now it's just about over it. How's that one?
It still needs about 1 inch to get past the clamshell.
Okay. So the engine is not quite level. But that's okay. We can let it down a little bit.
That's about, I mean, maybe if you went a little bit more, it would slip over it. It's touching it right now.
We stop there so we don't get too far.
It's right on the back edge of it, like starting to slope down.
Watch your fingers, but
Yeah, it's like, you could probably drop it now and it would go over. That last little shake you did, I got it.
okay. All right.
Over the edge.
I'm almost wondering whether you want the engine to be just a little further forward.
Yeah. I mean, I got room on the mounts to go more forward.
Just looking at distance, but you're probably okay. We're just
It's a little tight.
yeah. Well, we're bumping the brackets for the engine lift on the front dash, but I think that's okay. What you think?
We could probably,
The other thing we could do is tip it or level it a little bit more.
I think if we go down,
Mm-hmm.
this one will start going on.
Okay.
And I think that one too.
All right. I think the engine may be just a tad high in front, but
Want to angle it a little bit?
yeah, maybe so. Okay. Better?
Yeah.
Just
It's got clearance on the back side of the mount now.
So we can go down?
Yep.
All right. Oops, didn't mean to drop it quite that fast. There.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of clearance in there. I mean, we may need, with these brackets, you may need some washers on the backside to
Shim it.
Yeah. It's either that or we're just going to get them good and clamped, but
I think they bowed out a little bit when you cut them.
you're,
Need the bolts?
yeah. Go up just a little bit. Maybe too far. Hair too far. I said that, but. Nope, there it goes. Right on through. Okay. All right, well, let's take the camera in here and get a better. Can you get your light there?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So
That bracket's actually resting where it should.
where it should. Part of the goal of what we've been trying to do here is what you really want is for the bracket to rest on these bars as much as you can, and the bolt should go in pretty much without any tension on it. And then you bolt it down and clamp it down. We had to make the holes bigger because with these plates that spaced the bracket out too far to clear. But they were clearance holes originally, so we'll make sure we have hard washers in and or spacers and or, you know, make sure we can torque these down tight to the mount so they can't move. But at this point, I think we have both sides now.
Yep, that one's on it too.
So that we trimmed the bracket so that this part of the bracket sits on that bar, front and rear, and we had to trim the outside enough that it could get inside this bar. Now I think the factory stamped brackets would actually sit on that bar too, but we don't have those. We have, you know, aftermarket solid steel ones. But I think that's going to work, and we'll just have to torque those down solid. And you know, the engine is resting on the mount right now, and then we'll tighten up the bolts to keep it from moving around.
Now, just to be clear, we elongated the bolt hole in that bracket about 1/8 of an inch, maybe a little bit more, so that the mounts would align correctly. Now, normally I wouldn't like to do that. I'd rather have the clearance hole being close. But as I look at the way this is designed, it's a clearance hole to the bolt, and the intent is that you should clamp that bracket down so it's tight and it shouldn't move. So we're going to recognize that the holes, I'm going to call it a little bit egg-shaped, and I'm going to find some hardened washers or stainless steel. You know, something like a fender washer that's maybe 1/16 of an inch thick and hard that I'm going to put in behind and clamp just to make sure that the clearance holes aren't too large. And I think we'll go with that rather than going back and re-drilling holes in the frame or re-drilling holes in the clamshell mount itself.
Did you show this piece on the oil pan?
Did not. Go ahead. Point.
The little notch.
Had to
Had to
clear
cut a
that to
piece
clear the
off of
cross
it.
member.
It looks like, I mean, I might have to do a little bit of shaving on the very bottom, but It's better than it was last time.
Okay. And we have the engine positioned about as far back as we can. It's one notch forward on the brackets, on the adapter plates. And it gives us pretty good clearance to the front of dash or firewall. We got, what, the 1.5 inch L brackets for the engine hoist are kind of up against, but that's as far back. So you'll end up with about 1 inch or so from the engine to the firewall. So the 204R used that crossmember, and you got a good pointer.
Got a breaker bar.
Yeah, that'll work. So this is where the mount has to sit. Here's where the mount is on the back of the transmission on this 4L60. So we'll need to extend the bracket forward far enough that we can set the mount on there with a welded extension. And so what we'll do is just get a measurement on how much more we need of that, and then we'll pour back out again. But I think we're just about there. Very good. All right, so we've got the engine hoist released. We have a block of wood under the transmission so we could hold it. So everything is sitting, and basically the mounts, the brackets are sitting on the mounts and a little bit on the bolts. But I think that's as close as we're going to be. We're kind of tight underneath on the oil pan. There's one spot we're going to have to, where there was a boss that came off, it needs to get trimmed just a little bit more. But hey, it's looking pretty good right now. Now we just got to get the crossmember extended.
Well, just a couple more things here as we finish up. First of all, you can see the oil pan. We mentioned that a little bit of material was trimmed off, and you can see that basically about in the center of the picture, where there's a boss there on the side that has been trimmed back. Here's the crossmember out of the car. It's been removed so my son-in-law, who's a good welder, can help us out and get that fixed up. You can see over on the left side, that's the kick-up that interferes with the floor pan, so why we couldn't move it forward. It's a little closer look. You can see where the mount sat for the 204R, quite a ways there to the back. And here's the finished mount with a tab welded on to bring it forward. And we had him make that with enough room that if we needed to move the engine forward or backward a little bit, we could still do that. And we also had him make a shim and install it to the bottom. What you want to make sure is that when you install the engine and transmission, you need to have them sitting at a particular angle so that the universal joint angles come out correct, so that you don't have vibration in the drive shaft. And so what we elected to do is we had him weld the plate on the bottom, as you see here, and make us a little spacer plate. And all of these transmissions typically had shims so you could adjust the back end, but we aren't quite sure where this transmission was going to come out. So like I say, we had him weld the attachment to the bottom of the crossmember and make us a spacer so it's at the same height now as the 204R was. But we have some flexibility that if we need to drop the back of the transmission, a 1/4 inch or so, the thickness of the plate, we can do that. And we kept the shims together that were with the original mount. So we've got some ability to make adjustments as we measure the angle across the U-joints at the front of the shaft and at the rear of the shaft to make sure that we get proper angles. But that's all for now.